Let me tell you a story about a colonial predator who burned the interior of Florida and made Spain run. About a disgraced officer who tried to save souls, treasure, and honor. About a heroine who knew every backwater, every road, every deer trail from here to Tallahassee. She was born to two worlds, and her knowledge of the terrain is what got her killed. This is the story of Marcos Delgado's lost treasure and the 1705 Apalachee Revolt. Although the exact date is unknown, most historians agree that Captain Marcos Delgado was born in Sevilla, Spain around 1670. Born to a minor noble family in Sevilla, Delgado first shows up in Havana, Cuba in 1691, according to Colonial Spanish dispatches to Sevilla, Spain. On October 15th, 1692, Captain Marcos Delgado reports for duty to St. Augustine for the frontier. His orders were simple: ride west, reinforce the Spanish mission systems along the old Camino Real. He was to take an entire battalion of Spanish soldiers with him. That's 200 men. He was also ordered to take the pay with him. That's 300 pieces of 8, or Spanish doubloons if you'd like, 8 reals. That was the pay for the soldiers. He was carrying treasure with him. Delgado heads west down the Camino Real towards Mission de St. Luis, near modern-day Tallahassee. Delgado's mission: protect the mission, protect the friars. Most importantly, protect the people, protect the Apalachee. But the legend takes a much darker turn. Recent documents discovered at the Carolina Historical Society in Charleston, South Carolina, revealed what Delgado was actually up to. This asshole decided he was going to kidnap the Apalachee and sell them into slavery to his enemy, to Colonel Moore. Delgado insisted on being paid in untraceable, unmarked liquidity, and during the colonial period, what that meant was uncut gemstones. Which I absolutely hate to say it, but it makes sense. The royal Spanish crown knew how many pieces of 8 he had. He had 300. That was a soldier's pay for 3 months. If he had more than that on him, they would have probably asked questions. And if he had the English pounds on him, sterling from the enemy, that would have been direct evidence of treason, and he would have swung for it. So that was this idiot's get-rich-quick scheme. He was going to kidnap the people he swore to protect and sell them to his enemy into slavery. That's what this douche canoe decided it was a good idea. That is the legend of Marcos Delgado's lost treasure. The Camino Real directly translates from Spanish into the Royal Road. It was the original road into the interior of Florida, Spanish Florida. And much like today's transit systems, it was built for supply, military transport, civilians transport, and commerce. It was not much different, but there was a unique trait that the Camino Real had that most transit corridors didn't have. It had a Spanish mission systems that was spread between 10 to 15 miles apart all along the Camino Real, spread across northern Florida and the Panhandle, all the way to Mobile. The reason they were 10 to 15 miles apart was that was a day's ride back in the early 1600s. These missions were a center of community for both the Native Americans and the Spanish soldiers that were settling in the frontiers of Spanish Florida. These were meant to protect the natives and the trade routes that were strewn across and along the landscape of northern Florida, which meant these were not only religious institutions meant to spread the word among the natives. These were also fortified positions meant to protect Spanish supply lines, military trade routes, fur trading routes, but most importantly, to protect the food source of St. Augustine, the largest city in Spanish Florida. Most of these forts were earthen forts, sparsely manned. Delgado knew that if a major assault came, these earthen forts wouldn't last long against the onslaught of the English and their Creek allies. And the soldiers did too. They knew their positions were weak. They knew that they were outnumbered. And they knew they were poorly led. Bad combination. Delgado arrives to Mission de Saint Louis, one of the most important mission systems along the Camino Real in the capital of the Apalachee territory. From this centralized location, the defense of the interior of Florida would be mounted. Now, according to surviving records, the Apalachee were willing converts to Catholicism. But we really have to take that with a grain of salt, because the Spanish were the ones who wrote that down. We really don't know if they were forced or if they went willingly, but they did intend the Spanish to protect them. All right, so this reconstruction of the Apalachee house is pretty interesting. And another interesting fact of the Apalachee people is that it's a maternal culture. So the power is passed through the mother. The inheritance is all passed through the mother, meaning maternal. That's actually kind of interesting. Other related groups like the Seminole, they all kind of bunched together, and they were already well established by the time that the Spanish arrived. And when I say maternal, so basically when the woman from another clan married into another tribe, the male would have to move to the Apalachee encampment or village, whatever you want to call it, instead of the other way around. So they were actually pretty progressive. Who knew? Somewhere in these forests lived a woman that history barely remembered, but she is so integral in the survival of her people. We only know her by her nickname, Rose. But she was half Apalachee, half Spaniard. She was Captain Delgado's mistress. This is her story too. Somewhere in these woods lived a woman history barely remembers. Born to two worlds, half Spanish, half Apalachee, and we only know her by her nickname, Rose. Before the Apalachee were even introduced to the Spanish, they were one of the most powerful societies in Southeast America. Their society was structured around powerful chiefs, clan systems, and councils that would govern political life. Appalachian society was structured around extended families and powerful clan systems. Each Apalachee town was governed by a powerful chieftain that would be led by city councils to govern daily life for the Apalachee people. These towns were connected by trade, diplomacy, and ancient trade routes that crisscrossed the area, like the Camino Real. When Spanish missionaries arrived in the early 1600s, they didn't come as conquerors, or at least they didn't say they did. They came as allies, or at least that's what they portrayed at the time of their arrival. The Franciscan orders built mission systems all along the Camino Real in states like Texas, Florida, New Mexico. These mission systems were centers for politics, trade, and commerce. These mission systems weren't only political and religious centers, they were also fortified positions to protect the Apalachee. For decades, the Apalachee and the Spanish lived alongside each other in relative harmony. The Apalachee providing protection and food, which brought relative peace to the frontier systems, and the Spanish brought defensive systems with their armies and their artillery. An unintentional consequence of the meeting of these two cultures is the integration between the Apalachee way of life and the European way of life. You can see that in the archaeological evidence sitting before you. You can see these European-style dishes that are actually fired in the same technology that the Apalachee had been using for eons. They molded their technologies and their culture to create these beautiful vessels and cooking ware and pottery and porcelain, so that they could survive next to each other. This was a culture that was comfortable with the status quo. They were comfortable with the defenses that the Spanish gave them against their Creek enemies. This is a great example of two cultures that are coexisting peacefully with each other. Until one day they didn't. At Mission de St. Louis, Father Juan del Prega and the Franciscan order were central to daily life around the mission. And they would have led it from this site, the chapel at Mission de St. Louis. They led Mass, taught Catholicism, and helped weave Spanish and Apalachee cultures together. This was their legacy. It was Juan de Parga of Spain. A sense of religious duty sent him to the New World, to the Spanish missions. After years of living with the Apalachee, learning their cultures, he became a trusted member of their society, not only as a spiritual guide, but as a cultural bridge between the Spanish and the Apalachee. Father Juan de Prega was part of a broader mission system that the Spanish crown relied on to anchor their colonial presence here in North America. The Spanish order that he was a part of had very distinct responsibilities. They were spiritual leaders, yes, but they were also community builders. They would have oversaw constructions like this. This is a replication of an Apalachee community home. In the middle of Mission de St. Louis stands an enormous Apalachee council house. This was the center of Apalachee culture here in the capital of the Apalachee territory. Most likely, in an Apalachee council home like this, is where Captain Marcos Delgado most likely met Rose, his mistress. And they would have met under the watchful eye of Father Juan del Parga, who knew Captain Marcos Delgado was a married man, which in the Catholic faith is very much a sin. But the father, being a practical man, most likely turned a blind eye to this, probably because he would have viewed Captain Delgado as a linchpin in society. He would have been a very important key cog in the wheel of Mission de St. Louis and the protection of the Apalachee people, his flock. Okay, fourth wall break here. He's going to grow to regret that decision. Imagine yourself 1,000 miles away from your home in a frontier, staring out the window on a nice Saturday afternoon in September, staring at your door, waiting for a message that you know is coming, and you are dreading. In a small, uncomfortable room like this, Marcos Delgado would have sat awaiting orders. And on September 17th, 1699, those orders came. Captain Marcos Delgado was ordered west to spy on the expanding French Empire near modern-day Mobile, Alabama. This is where the story gets interesting. Captain Marcos Delgado leaves at dawn the next morning for the French frontier of Mobile, Alabama. At the end of the 17th century, the great empires of Europe were fighting over North America. That war just ended. Something else was coming. Something worse. Something that would start in motion. An event that would lead to catastrophic failure of the Spanish mission systems along the Camino Real. King William's War was over, but Queen Anne's War is just beginning. And by 1701, forts around North America were starting to be reinforced. Overland trade routes are now being watched, and spies are now being dispatched to every edge of the empire. One of the most dangerous frontiers was here, along the Gulf Coast. Mobile was the crossroads of empires. English Carolinas, Spanish Florida, and the ever-expanding westward French. This is where the three most powerful empires in Europe each other. And in 1702, all hell broke loose. And about this time in history in the colonial Americas, this is where our antagonists enter the scene. The Spanish had an experienced frontier commander named Captain Marcos Delgado, charged with the defenses of the mission systems. Delgado's counterpart on the English side was named Colonel James Moore of the Carolina militias. He was an avid expansionist. along with endless ambition. And when these two men finally meet on the battlefield, it will change the interior of Florida forever. And as fate would have it, Moore and Delgado were given the same orders by their respective governments to spy on the French in their eastern expansion along the Mississippi.